2, 3, 4.
Hi everyone, this is Jewish Talk, coming to you from NASA Community College on 90.3 WHPC, also streaming on nccradio.org. That's a website, nccradio.org. If you're on vacation, going out of town, far away from this station, you can actually go online and hear us at www.nccradio.org. This program is also later archived on Spreaker.com, and you can find it in all your favorite podcast locations. You can always hear us at any time. Of course, I want to remind everyone, we are repeated on Sunday evenings as well. So let your friends know. If you like the program, wake them up. Tell them, at 11 o'clock at night, you can hear a wonderful replay of our program. My friends, let's say hello on the radio, hello online, hello to the world. This is Rabbi Perl, and I'm going to take you on a journey on a number of issues. The main issue will be all around the world of kosher. But first, I want to talk about honesty. Bob was a software developer whose internet browsing history revealed this was his typical schedule. If you looked on his computer, 9 a.m., wow, he arrives. He surfs Reddit. Reddit is one of those websites for a couple of hours. And he also watches cat videos. This is at 9 a.m. At 11:30 a.m., he takes lunch. At 1 p.m., it's eBay time. 2 p.m., Facebook and LinkedIn updates. At 4:30, end of the day, updates. He sends an email to management. And at 5 p.m., he goes home. Now, I'm sure you've caught on curiously missing in this schedule is work. He took lunch, eBay time, he surfed their websites, Facebook, and updating. Apparently, Bob didn't do any. The thing is, that didn't match up with Bob's output. Bob apparently received excellent performance reviews, even being hailed the best developer in the building. His code was clean, well written, and submitted in a very timely fashion. He was somehow producing great work without actually working. Bob's employer didn't seem to notice that he wasn't doing any work because from the corporation's vantage point, he was productive. But Bob's employer did notice something else. Weird computer traffic was coming into the company service through Bob's remote login credentials. And importantly, the traffic seemed to be coming from China. To make matters even stranger, the Chinese connection via Bob's remote connection was active while Bob was sitting in the office. The company was baffled. Why would Bob be logging in remotely and from China while he was right in front of them? The company contacted Verizon, this was the service provider, and asked them to look into this, to investigate. Verizon got to work and came to the root of the problem. While Bob's employer had assumed that some sort of malware had infected their systems, this really wasn't the case. Verizon determined that the problem was Bob himself and explained how a guy with great performance reviews matches up with a schedule with cat videos and shopping on eBay. What was the answer? Are you standing or are you sitting, dear friends? Bob was outsourcing his own work to China. The plan was pretty simple. Bob had hired a consulting firm in China, sent the consultants the work assigned to him, and then got out of the way collecting paychecks the whole time. The Chinese workers did the rest, including returning the completed code to Bob's employer's service. So Verizon concluded that Bob had most likely been doing this for a few years, taking about a quarter of his pay and using it to buy the services of a lower-cost providers overseas. Bob was fired, of course. The employer was working on developing software for the U.S. government and outsourcing that to China. That wasn't acceptable. But Bob probably was laughing all the way to the bank until they caught him. They caught onto this guy. According to the Verizon security team, this wasn't Bob's only job, and it probably wasn't the only job he had outsourced. Bob was making several $100,000 a year per Verizon and only had to pay the Chinese consulting firm about $50,000 annually. Nicht so schlecht. Why do I bring this up, my friends? I want to bring it back to one of our founding fathers, Jacob, Yaakov. We read how after years of service to Lavan, his father-in-law, he grabs his wives and his children, and he flees his father-in-law's home secretly and expeditiously. Hashem, God, visits Lavan in a dream, and he warns him, he says, do not harm Jacob. He ran away, do not harm him at all. And the Medrash wonders, why did Jacob merit this divine protection? It's one thing for all of us to feel that God protects us, but the Medrash observes that here Hashem proactively contacts Lavan to warn him to keep his distance. As the Ramban Nachmanides points out, despite Lavan being a despicable, disloyal liar, cheater, thief, idolater, God comes to him in this prophetic dream in honor of the righteous Jacob. What component, what aspect of Jacob's personality merited this extraordinary security that God warned him in advance? Lavan, don't touch your son-in-law for running away. Now, was it in fact because did Jacob earn this because he was Ishtam Yoshev Olim, which translates he was a yeshiva boy who diligently spent his day and night studying? Did he merit it because he was so studious? Is that why he merited it? Was it because he had a steadfast commitment to the principles of Torah? As we know that even though he lived in such a locale, he fulfilled all the mitzvahs. Was it maybe because he had the merit of his father and father-in-law? His father, of course, was Isaac. His grandfather was Abraham. Maybe it was because of the kindness that he had displayed. Maybe it was in profundity. It was in the depth. You know, there was something that was about his personality, as evidenced by he introduced to us the evening service. Maybe in that merit. So which one of these aspects and qualities do you think Jacob merited to have God's personal protection? And when he went, God went and warned Lavan, don't touch your son-in-law, Jacob. Surprise, my friends, the Medrash answers. We see from the narrative that what was the highlight of Jacob's life, that he merited such protection, is because he worked honestly, with integrity, professionally and diligently. That reward is greater than what he could have achieved through the merits of his forefathers. Jacob didn't cut corners. He didn't steal pencils. He didn't take a nap on the job. He didn't distort his hours. He didn't outsource to another country. This behavior is admired and praised above all the other tremendous accomplishments that he had. Think about this. Some of the figures and the characters of our history have earned different titles. For example, when we speak about Avraham, we call him Avraham Avinu. He's called Abraham, our forefather. Moses, we call him Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher. When we speak about David, we say Hamelach, David Hamelach, the king. When we think of Joseph, he also has a surname. He's called a tzaddik, a righteous individual. However, we do find one place in which Jacob is called Jacob, who we're talking about right now, is called Yaakov HaTzadik, Jacob the righteous. And we find it in the writings of the Rambam, Maimonides. It's Rambam himself who speaks. Just as an employee is forbidden to steal the wages of his employee, to delay payment, so too it is an employee who is forbidden to pilfer from the labor he is due to provide his employer. How could he do this? By wasting time, a bit here, a bit there, so spending the day in deceit. So too must he work with all of his might. And he goes on to say, for the tzaddik Yaakov, for the righteous individual Jacob, said, I've served your father with all my might. He therefore was rewarded for this labor in this world as well. You see, Jacob earned the title tzaddik, which means a righteous individual. He was considered this righteous person because he practiced righteousness. He was committed to the principles of honesty, integrity, diligence, and truthfulness. We often make the mistake of thinking that we never live up to the level. How can we live up to the level of our forefathers? That we never achieve their piety. After all, could we survive the many experiences that Abraham? He had to jump into the fiery furnace. Are we prepared to, like Jacob, like Isaac, who was ready to give up his life on the Akedah to be sacrificed? So the Rambam, Maimonides, reminds us that we don't have to be like our forefathers. We don't need to go looking to sacrifice our lives to achieve this extraordinary. Just be like Jacob. Simply be an honest, hardworking, and trustworthy individual. Seems easy, but the truth is that honesty is such a lonely word in a world where there's so much and so many are untrue. You see, my friends, I think all of you, if you're an employer or an employee, it's become kind of a given already that an employee sits around and is looking at the iPhone every other minute. In 2006, a report was published in the Inc.com, and it concluded that the losses cost to U.S. employers was $544 billion a year. The report found that in an 8-hour cycle or 8-hour day, employers spend an average of 1.86 hours on something other than their jobs, not including lunch and scheduled breaks. Additionally, of those surveyed, 52% admitted that their biggest distraction during work hours was surfing the internet for personal use. My friends, this was in the year 2006. Can you imagine what's going on today? Being an honest employee and putting in our full effort for work applies not only for our professional career, but in being accountable to our collective boss, even long after we have retired. Hashem, our collective boss, compensates us with life, health, resources, our faculties. And we are here to dedicate our talents, our gifts and blessings and time to Hashem to repair this world. And therefore, I'm living with this idea that we must not waste or squander time. We can't outsource what we are meant to do and who we are meant to be. We can't outsource it to China, to anybody else. To be worthy of being called a tzaddik, a righteous individual, we must be honest and have integrity in not stealing from others or from the gifts from Hashem. If only we were more successful, more comfortable, or more respected, if only we had a perfect bill of health, less to worry about, and more to look forward to, then we would most certainly be happy. Or so we think. We tend to see happiness as a result of our circumstances, relegating it to the distant realm of if only I had won, the big lottery this past week. If only, then leaving us with little we can do to influence, in bringing it to real. Accordingly, the word happiness is derived from the Middle English word hap, H-A-P, as in happenstance or haphazard, implying a random chance or luck. If you were lucky enough to be born into ideal circumstances, you have the conditions needed to be happy. If not, it seems there isn't much you can do to impact your sense of satisfaction in life. On the other hand, besimcha, the Hebrew word for being in a state of happiness, shares the same letters as the word machshava, which means thought. The Hebrew word for thought is machshava, and those words spell the word besimcha, in happiness. Judaism views happiness as a way of thinking, which is something that we can consciously direct, as opposed to a state of being that results from a specific set of circumstances outside of our control. So from this perspective, happiness does not derive from our objective state of affairs, but from our own subjective state of mind. Put simply by Plato, reality is created by the mind. We can change our reality by changing our mind. Meaning, it isn't luck or happenstance that ensures that we attain happiness. Rather, it is the way we think about and process the circumstances that we encounter along the path. This simple idea has huge implications. It means that we can instantly achieve the happiness we seek by adjusting the focus of our thoughts. This deceptively simple idea reveals that the greatest obstacle to our happiness is the mind's tendency to fixate on the limitations of our circumstances and to regulate and to take for granted the myriad of good things we experience every single day. Every time we have a positive experience, we raise our expectations, sometimes exponentially, constantly needing more and more stimulus to achieve the same level of satisfaction. In the words of our sages, he who has 100 wants 200, and he who has 200 wants 400. So as a result, we never reach the satisfaction we seek, and happiness remains, at this point, an endless pursuit, a never-ending, treadmill, always just beyond our reach. From this perspective, fulfillment becomes a frustrating illusion that never materializes. Judaism's solution to the happiness problem is to view happiness as a thought, making it infinitely renewable, always at our disposal, rather than some existential lottery ticket. So, all it requires is a minor investment of mental energy and enhanced awareness to stop thinking only about what's missing in our lives and focus instead on what is present. And in the words of the Mishnah, who is wealthy Ezeo asher hasameach bechelkoi. He who is wealthy is a person who is satisfied with his lot. True satisfaction in life comes not from having the things we want, but from wanting the things that we have. To this end, there's a Jewish practice of reciting at least 100 blessings each day. Why? To seek out every opportunity to remember and verbally acknowledge our gratitude for the basic, aspects of amenities of life. For in life, the only things we truly have are the things that we appreciate. The letters that make up the word simcha also spell shemacha, simcha, shin, mem, ches, hey. You can also read those letters that spell happiness, also makes the word shemacha, which means to erasure, teaching us that a key component of happiness is our ability to live fully in the present, erasing, at least temporarily, any painful thoughts about the past or anxious thoughts relating to the future. Now is where true happiness is found. The Baal Shem Tov teaches the following. The Baal Shem Tov is the founding Hasidic master. He says, "You are where your thoughts are," meaning that one's true location is where their mind is focused. The letters of the word sameach, happy, also spells the word sham moach, which translates the location of one's thoughts. When we do not recognize that we are in control of our own happiness, we live in a near constant state of anxiety and disconnect. And that becomes a defining feature of our lives. But when we realize that we have the capacity to choose and change our thoughts at any moment, we come to appreciate that the key to enduring happiness lies entirely in our hands. And now allow me to continue sharing with you, and I do appreciate everyone here with us today, all about kosher. What does kosher mean? Am I allowed to eat mock non-kosher foods? Let's get right into this. Let's begin at the beginning. What does the word kosher mean? The Hebrew word kosher, kasher, literally means fit, something that is fit. The laws of kosher define the foods that are fit for consumption for us. But the word has come to refer more broadly to anything that is above board or legit. Many commercial foods are certified kosher, meaning that they contain only kosher ingredients. Kosher animals include mammals that chew their cud and have split hooves. Fish, to be kosher, must have fins and scales, and certain birds as well. Kosher slaughter, what is the word kosher slaughter? Means that the kosher mammals and the birds have been killed in a special, painless procedure known as shechita. When we talk about koshering meat, that's a process of removing the blood from meat. Since kosher laws do not allow the consumption of blood. My father, blessed memory, was an expert in koshering meat, and it called a menaker, it means a divaner, was able to remove the veins because of the blood. In a kosher kitchen, only kosher food is processed, and milk and meat are kept separate as per the kosher laws. We often hear the word, "I'm going to kosher my utensils." This refers to the process of purging residue of non-kosher food that was accidentally absorbed. Now, the question that often comes our way is, are imitation crab, pork, and cheeseburgers kosher? Is it okay to eat these imitation kind of foods? As a general rule, even if the Torah forbids a certain food, one is still permitted to eat kosher food that has been artificially flavored to taste like that food. However, if it closely resembles the actual non-kosher food, it may be necessary to mark it as an imitation so that no one will be confused. So, what about tastes like milk and meat? You're able to get some food that has milk and meat together. Well, let me first tell you, my first port of call is a fascinating incident in the Talmud. Yalta is the name, once said to her husband, Rabbi Nachman, "Now, let us see. Whatever God forbade us, he permitted us something corresponding. He forbade blood, yet we're permitted to eat liver. He forbade us to eat pork, but permitted the brains of a shibuta. I would like to eat something that has the taste of meat cooked with milk." This was a question to her husband, Rabbi Nachman. What did Rabbi Nachman do? He ordered the chefs to skewer cow udders and roast them. Sounds delicious. The commentaries explain that for every forbidden food or act, God provided another similar permitted food or act with the same pleasurable sensation as the forbidden one. Why? Because God is not out to deny us the pleasure inherent in that food or act, but rather the sin itself is essentially forbidden. But there are a few important caveats before you dig in. So, hold yourself back, everyone. Control yourself, please. Kosher certification. As always, you need to make sure that the product has a reliable kosher certification. In fact, there is an imitation crab on the market that actually contains real crab. It is mostly made of white-fleshed fish, but is flavored with real crab. So you really have to make sure that if you're going to have an imitation crab, it has a kosher certification. Another thing to take into consideration when you're eating such stuff is, what will people think? This is a concept in Jewish law called marat ayin, the appearance to the eye. Certain acts are prohibited just because observers mistake them for forbidden acts, causing them to either think that the act is in fact permissible or to view the person negatively. Generally, even if something is forbidden because of maras ayin, it may not be done even in the privacy of one's home. However, since the reason for this prohibition is only because of how the act appears to others, if one takes necessary precautions, one is permitted to do the act. So, dear friends, if you're really out there and you really need to have some imitation crab, and it meets all the criteria I mentioned, I say es gesundheit. Now, let's talk a little bit about meat and non-dairy milk. For example, if one wishes to drink almond milk while eating meat, he needs to indicate that this in fact is almond milk, not regular milk, which is forbidden. So on the container would have to be the big words, almond milk, because if it looked from the distance, it weren't clear, it could look like a regular milk bottle, and this guy's sitting eating a steak. So again, if it's clearly indicated, it's okay. In the olden days, this was done by popping some whole almonds into the milk. Today, it can be achieved by having the container on the table, as opposed to just like in a milk jug, making it clear that it is almond milk. The same would need to be done in order to serve a veggie burger that resembles meat, topped with real cheese, or to serve a beef burger on a slice of imitation cheese. It is fine to eat, provided that the package is nearby and visible, or its parva identity is spelled out on the menu, on the receipt, etc. What about mock pork? Mock pork. This principle would also extend to foods that were made to resemble pork. If it is certified kosher, you can eat it if the viewer can easily see evidence that it is a not the real deal. What about parva ice cream? In the event that the imitation item has become, that everybody, like for example on Shabbos, usually the end, in the summertime in particular, everybody knows at the end of the Shabbos meal, after chicken or meat and liver, whatever a person likes, they usually serve a dessert, and it's usually ice cream. Well, it's become, standard, and everybody knows that obviously it's parv. It's not forbidden. It's permitted to eat it even without any special markers. Therefore, according to many, there's no issue with a parva ice cream dessert after a meat meal. Many kosher certifiers are of the opinion that the same holds true of surimi, that is mock crab. Since many, both Jewish and non-Jewish people, know that surimi exists, it does not need to be marked when served on a kosher table. Nevertheless, if you're eating one of these imitation foods in the company of people who are unaware that these products exist, make it a point, my friends, to inform them that they do not jump to conclusions about you or the food. So I know I've now ruined everybody's breakfast here this morning or late snacks, but that's the deal, my friends. These days, imitation products really approximate forbidden foods. But believe it or not, the real thing won't always be off the table. Are you standing for this, my friends? Are you ready for this? I'm going to tell you something. As the Medrash tells us, that why is the pig in Hebrew called chazir? Chazir. Why? Because in the future, God will return from the word lahachzir, it to be able to eat it. The Jewish community, when Mashiach comes, we're going to be able to eat chazir, pig. In other words, in the Messianic era, the world will be purified and elevated to the extent that even a pig will become permissible to eat. While there's a rule that the laws of the Torah will never change, commentators explain that God will actually alter the pig's physiology so that it will chew its cud and therefore have both its kosher signs. May we merit the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days for so many reasons, and now you can add to your reasons why you want Mashiach for another reason, so you should be able to have some steak lavan. Now, in general, why, pigs and Judaism? Why is there such a deep, people don't, revolt over it? Yet, as I just explained, there's a promising future. There's probably no animal as disgusting to Jewish sensitivities as pig. It's not just because it may not be eaten. There are plenty of other animals that aren't kosher either, but none of them arouse as much as disgust as the pig. Colloquially, the pig is the ultimate symbol of loathing. When you say that someone acted like a chazir, it suggests that he or she did something unusually abominable. Indeed, many people think of pork, ham, bacon as the most unkosher foods there are. Let's explore the reasons for this. We will also discover that as bad as the pig's past is, as I just, blew its cover, it has a bright future ahead of it. So why not eat pork? Because The Torah gives two physical signs that mark a kosher land animal. They have to be able to ruminate, which means chew their cud, and have split hooves. Because of that, why the pig is the ultimate symbol of loathing, is because they just have one or another of these. And that's why they're not kosher. One of these of creatures who has missing is the pig. It has hooves which are split, but it does not chew its cud, and therefore it is not kosher. Many of the commentaries offer reasons for the mitzvah of keeping kosher. However, the Talmud asserts that kosher laws fall under the category of chok, mitzvahs that have no rationale, and makes the following observation regarding pork. It says, our rabbis have taught, keep the chukim refers to those mitzvahs against which the world argues, and they can't take it, considering them illogical and deserving of mockery. And what is one of those things that the world looks upon with mockery is the fact that in the Jewish community they do not eat pork. So this mitzvah is basically a supra-rational one, not something that we can understand logically. In a similar vein, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah says that one shouldn't say, I abstain from pork because I don't like it, but rather that we do so because of God's commandment. Now, it's not the only animal on the unkosher list, the pig, but it gets the worst treatment of any of them. I'll give you an example. People don't like to use the word pig. Many call the animal a davar acher, another thing, rather than its proper name. This practice goes back to the Talmud. We have an absolute prohibition against raising pigs in the Holy Land of Israel. And the sages, they pronounce some very negative words on a person who raises pigs because they cause frequent and serious damage. The Talmud traces this ruling to the civil war between the Hasmonean brothers, Hyrcanus and Aristobulus, in 67 BCE. Aristobulus and his forces had barricaded themselves around the Temple Mount, where they were besieged by Hyrcanus' army. Each day, Aristobulus, these men would send down a basket of coins and receive in return lambs for the daily temple offerings, until one day the besiegers sent up a pig. When it was halfway up, it stuck its hooves into the wall, and the entire land of Israel, which is 1,000 miles square, trembled. And that is when the sages declared, "Cursed be the person who raises pigs." Just giving you some ideas of how in the Jewish tradition the attitude towards pigs. Martyrdom rather than eat pig. The Syrian Greek Emperor Antiochus IV, as part of his campaign to outlaw Judaism, sent his soldiers to the land of Israel with orders to force the Jewish community to offer pigs as sacrifices to the Hellenistic gods and consume the meat. One Jewish person, 90-year-old individual, his name was Elazar, he defied the order and endured a savage beating. Even when he was offered the chance to just pretend to eat it, while really he would be given kosher meat, nevertheless he held his ground. Eventually, the Greek soldiers met their match in the town of Modi'in. I'm sure you remember when Matisyahu, the Hasmonean, began the revolt, and this was the end of that period, and that was the preceding before the whole holiday of Hanukkah. So what did it do wrong? Why does Judaism so abhor the pig? Number one, it says it carries diseases. 10 measures of plagues descended the world, pigs took 9 of them. Such diseases are also easily transmittable from pigs to humans, and indeed is still the case with flu and other viruses. Maimonides quotes that it spreads filth. He notes that pigs wallow in the muck and eat revolting things. Were we allowed to eat pork, they would raise these pigs and introduce filth into their homes. Another reason given, the pig is a symbol of hypocrisy. It pretends to be a kosher animal. Why? Because it sticks out its hooves when it is resting, as if to say, I'm kosher. Meanwhile, it does not chew the cud, and therefore it's a symbol of hypocrisy, showing the world one way when you're really not. I'd like to share with you a story about another facet of the pig's lifestyle and its relevance to all of us. There were 2 brothers, one a wealthy magnate and the other a pauper, but a God-fearing person. When the poor brother's daughter was of marriageable age, he wound his way to his rich brother and asked him for, assistance with the wedding expenses. The rich man was happy to see his brother again, invited him to a lengthy tour of his palatial home. After a while, the poor brother got tired of it and asked his brother to cut it short. The latter, his brother, the rich brother, couldn't understand. In the future, we will be allowed to eat it. So what's going on over here? Why are we? What do you get so upset about? And he says, he was saying to him, don't you enjoy the exquisite beauty of every corner of my house? And the other brother said, there is a creature that wallows in mud all day. If you ask it what it wants, all it can think of saying is more mud. He was saying to his brother, you too are sunk in the mud of material pleasures, and all you want is more mud and more possessions, instead of focusing on the truly important things of life. This is what he told his brother, who was so proud of all the things that he had, and the statues and the swimming pools, I don't know, whatever it is. He basically was telling him, you're wallowing in the materialism, and that's not really what the focus of life should be. So today, then, the pig represents the sordid side of life. But as I indicated just a few minutes ago, in the future, we will be able to eat the pig. Why is the pig called in Hebrew chazir? Because in the future, God will return, lahachzir, return it to the Jewish community. In the era of Mashiach, the world at large will be purified. The world will be achieving a high spiritual level. So then the pig will become permissible for food. So this is, as I pointed out, there'll be a physical change in the physiology of the animal. It not only will it have the split hooves, but also will be able to chew its cud. Now, there are other aspects of the laws of kosher, and one of the things that often, gets people wondering and asking is, why the waiting period between meat and milk? Someone, asked this question, understands why the Torah tells us not supposed to eat meat and dairy together. Fine. But why can't I have a dairy dessert after I already finish eating my steak? What's up with the 6-hour buffer zone? And why is there no 6-hour break between dairy and meat? If I have my dairy, I have my, beginning a cereal in the morning, I don't have to wait 6 hours to have a meat lunch? So, let me try to explain this to you. In a somewhat cryptic discussion on this topic, the Talmud relates that the Babylonian sage Mar Ukva says, "I am like vinegar, the son of wine. My father, if he would eat meat today, would wait until tomorrow to eat cheese. I, however, will not eat them during the same meal, but at another meal I will eat cheese." So while the statement makes it clear that one can't eat meat and dairy at the same time, the Talmud itself does not exactly explain the reason why we need to wait 6 hours. So I'm going to share with you what the commentaries offer as a number of reasons why typically those who keep kosher will wait 6 hours after eating meat to have some dairy items, ice cream, whatever. Maimonides explains, that's the Rambam, that we're concerned that meat may get stuck between the teeth. However, after 6 hours, it would deteriorate to the degree that after 6 hours, even what's stuck between our teeth is not considered meat anymore. Rashi, Rab Shlomo Yitzchaki, he explains that due to the fatty nature of meat, the meaty taste can remain in a person's mouth for an extended period of time. If a person would eat dairy during this time, he would have combined the flavor of milk and the meat in his mouth, which of course we all know is prohibited. Some explain that it takes up to 6 hours to fully digest the meat. So it's even in the stomach. It needs to be digested, and the 6-hour buffer zone kicks in. So why don't we wait an equally long time after eating dairy products before eating meat? If we look at the reasons I just mentioned, it makes sense. The taste of dairy is not as strong, and pieces of dairy food do not generally get stuck in one's mouth. According to the Talmud, it's sufficient if one eats or drinks something else in order to cleanse the mouth of any residual dairy foods before eating meat. However, according to the Zohar, according to the mystical teachings, one should be careful to refrain from eating milk and meat not only in the same meal, but also in the same hour. And for this reason, it is the Chabad custom I'm sharing with you to refrain from eating meat for a full hour after eating dairy. Other communities have the custom of waiting a half an hour before eating meat. So there are two customs, either a half hour or an hour. But nevertheless, there's a waiting period as well between the dairy and the meat. This is true of the majority of dairy products. When it comes to eating hard cheese or cheeses with a very strong taste, and Swiss cheese, the custom is to wait 6 hours before eating meat. Now, there's another question that often bothers people. Why can't I find kosher filet mignon? In my shul, we have a mignon every time we need one. We don't have a filet mignon, but we have a mignon. A minion. Chevra. Don't get nervous. I'm talking about a minion, a quorum to daven. Technically, filet mignon is as kosher as any other cut of meat. The problem with filet mignon and other cuts from the rear is that they are located near the sciatic nerve, and fatty deposits known as in Hebrew as chelev, that is biblically forbidden. Only a very skilled person can separate the forbidden parts from the nearby kosher meat in a process which is called nikur, tunneling or deveining. As I mentioned, my father was an expert nikur, menaker. He knew how to devein. Therefore, it's hard to find kosher filet mignon, especially in the United States, where most slaughterhouses sell their hind portions of their cattle to the non-kosher butchers, but it does exist. The same is true with rump and sirloin steaks and the leg of lamb. My friends, I know that you are now at the border of practically puking after this conversation here this morning. Now, here's another question. What about non-kosher insulin injections? The person writes they have type 2 diabetes, unable to control it adequately with oral medication, and therefore requires insulin injections. The products that the doctor is suggesting are made either from human cadavers or pork product. What should I do? This was the question. Taking shots made of pork products does not pose any problem whatsoever. We are forbidden to orally ingest pork, but may benefit from non-kosher foods or the byproducts in other ways. This applies to non-medical areas as well, such as playing football with a pigskin ball, or wearing clothing made of leather which comes from a non-kosher animal. Bear in mind that the laws of kosher are suspended in many instances for medical purposes. Of course, I suggest speaking to an expert rabbi if it's necessary to take oral medicine which is not kosher. Injections which contain human remains do present a problem because we are forbidden to benefit from human bodies. I would therefore advise you to take the porcine or the pork products. It's no problem taking the insulin shots. And of course, I wish that individual success to be healthy under these trying circumstances. In general, the laws of kosher are relate to the person, the human being, but not for the animals. But there are, however, two sorts of non-kosher foods that we are not only forbidden to eat ourselves, but we're forbidden to derive any benefit from that. And that is chometz on Pesach, or a cooked mixture of dairy and meat. So pet food that does not contain both milk and meat is fine for year-round use. If, however, the product contains meat, then this product may only be used if it does not also contain milk or a milk derivative such as whey or casein. I should point out, though, that the meat that we may not cook with milk or may not benefit from it if it was cooked with milk is meat from a kosher animal. Therefore, if it can be determined that the meat in the pet food comes from a non-kosher animal, such as horse meat, then it is kosher for your pet. Now, talking so much about food, what about honey? Why is honey kosher? The rabbis actually discussed this question. The Mishnah states that which comes from something which is not kosher is not kosher. That which comes from something which is kosher is kosher. So, for example, milk from a camel or the eggs of a vulture are just as unkosher as the camel and the vulture. Why then, since bees are not kosher, is the honey of a bee permitted? Honey consists of nectar, which bees gather, store, and transport to their honeycombs. While in the bee, the nectar is broken down and transformed into honey by the enzymes in the bee, but is not actually digested by the bee. So the honey is not a product of the bee itself, as is the milk. 100% pure raw honey is kosher. When purchasing honey, be sure to check that it is certified as kosher by a reliable kosher agency, since non-kosher foods may have been processed on the same equipment, and non-kosher flavorings may have been added. So that's why it's so important to check out. Even honey needs to have a kosher certification. Can I go kosher at my own pace, is the question. Person writes to us, I'm considering to be keeping kosher at home, but leaps seem too daunting to me. My problem is that when I do it, I want to do it right. and anything short of 100% kosher seems like a compromise. Can you give some suggestions of how I can make this transition into a kosher home just a little bit easier? Here's some thoughts. You're on the right path. Dividing a mitzvah into small steps makes the goal much more attainable. Taking things slowly also adds the importance of the element of stability in your journey towards living this Torah lifestyle. But don't look at it as a compromise. Here's why. Suppose an adult wishes to learn a new language. Would he be compromising his mission by beginning with simple words? What about a child beginning the study of maths? Is he compromising by starting with simple arithmetic? Of course not. It is quite clear that neither cat spells cat or nor 2 + 2 = 4 is the ultimate goal. But there are necessary steps in the right direction. Mitzvahs are no different. You would indeed be compromising if you believe that as long as you don't eat bacon or cheeseburgers, you're eating kosher. And it would be compromise to think that tefillin really needs to be put on only once a week. But to say the journey begins with a small step, this is the way we grow. So regarding the mitzvahs, it has an additional component. Torah is not all or nothing. Each mitzvah is a fully blown relationship with Hashem. Each time we eat kosher, each time we put on tefillin, each time we observe the Sabbath, something extraordinary occurs. So on a practical note, I'm suggesting a 3-stage plan to help you. First of all, stage 1, buy only kosher meat. Just do that. Avoid eating meat together with milk. Stage 2, buy only products with a reliable kosher certification. You'll be surprised at how many items in the grocery store are kosher. Within that, divide your pots and pans, cutlery into meat and milk groupings, even though you previously may have used the newly designated milk spoon for meat. This is a good practice for what's yet to come. Practice will help minimize mess-ups once the kitchen is kosher. And step number 3, invite a rabbi to your home to survey the kitchen. He'll advise you on how best to divide up the milk and meat sections. He'll also help you determine which utensils can be made kosher, which have to be replaced. Then comes the big day. The sinks and the oven and the utensils are koshered, and you will be now eating in a kosher kitchen. Like they say, mile by mile is a trial. Yard by yard is hard, but inch by inch is a cinch. May the fulfillment of this important mitzvah bring you and your family only blessings. Wishing you all a wonderful week. Thank you so much for listening.
1, 2, 3, 4.